Hello and welcome. I am Raghav. I hope you are enjoying this journey of learning APM, and in the earlier parts we have seen how do we start with APM, how do we set up APM. So if I very quickly show you the earlier parts, the topics. So this is what we have been doing. In the earlier parts we have seen what has changed in APM2, how do you migrate, and then we have seen the APM basic setup on Windows and Mac operating system. And then in the last part we started with setup of Android mobile testing, and here we checked the missing dependencies. How do we see what is missing, what is already present on our system. Then we looked at how do we set up JDK on Windows and Mac operating system, along with setting up of environment variables like Java home and updating the path environment variable. Then we looked at how do we install APM Android drivers, which is a feature of APM2. We install the drivers separately, and then we saw how do we do the setup of Android SDK and SDK tools. And here when we were looking at this part, setup of Android SDK, there are two options: download only the required tools. We can go online and just download what is needed, set the path of Android home and update the path environment variables, and then we can check that we have everything and we are ready with the setup to start our Android mobile testing. The other option is, if you do not want to do manually everything, we can just download Android Studio and we can do the setup from there. So this is what we will see today. That is option 2. All this we have seen in the earlier session. Okay, this was all about option 1, how do we download all these folders, and then how do we use SDK Manager to get build tools and platform tools and set the variables. So this is option 2, which we will see today. Okay, so I'm going to go very basic, step by step, and I will explain you each and every step. I will do hands-on both on Windows and Mac operating system. You can follow along with me. You will also find a timeline in the description of this video, so in case you want to jump to any of the section, you can use the timeline. And if you have any questions, any doubts, you can let me know in the comment section. If you are stuck anywhere, you can try yourself, but if you are not getting any answers, you can always ask me anything in the comment section, or in general you want to discuss anything, you can use the comment section for that. So let's get started. The first step is we will download Android Studio from the Android Studio website, which is developer.android.com. so here let me show you on Windows first. I will go on my browser and just say Android Studio download, and this will take me to this website of Android Studio. And here you can see this is the Android Studio, so you can take whatever is latest at your time. You can click here and then read and accept the license agreement and download, and it will start the download. Okay, meanwhile let me also download it on my Mac so that I can then show you on both. So this is Android Studio, and yes, I will click here, and so you can see when I go to my Mac, I am getting options: Mac with Intel chip or Mac with Apple chip. So based on your Mac, if you are using the latest Mac with Apple M2 chip, you can use this one, and in case you are using the older Macs with the Intel chip, you can use this one. Okay, so you can then download this, will save this file in your downloads folder. This will be a DMG file. Okay, so while this is getting downloaded, if I go back to my Windows, it is almost done. Yes, this is done. And if I go to my downloads folder, we have got the Android Studio exe file or the installer present here. Okay, so now we just have to run the installer and install Android Studio. Okay, so you can install on the system and then start Android Studio. So let us do step number 2 and 3 now. I will double click this, Okay, so we have got this installation setup. So let me just minimize everything else. So this is our Android Studio setup. I will click on next. Now here it has already selected all this. Now in case you do not want to set up virtual devices using Android Studio, you can uncheck this, but for now I will keep it as it is. Now you can see it requires a lot of space on your system, so you should have the required space. And if you do not get Android virtual devices, you can see you can save almost 1 GB. So based on the space available, you can check this, or you can make the space available on your system. So if I check on my system, if I go to my computers or this PC, you can see I have space both on my C and D drive, so I can save it, or I can install it on any of these drives. So okay, so I will click on next. So you can also see whenever I am hovering over these options, I'm getting the description that what does it what is this particular package or tool for and what it will do. So I'll click on next. Now this is where it will ask you for the location where it will install Android Studio. So by default it is in C program files, but I want to keep it in my, let us say, D drive. So I will say D, and I'm just going to create a new folder called Android Studio. You can name it anything. Okay, so this is the new folder. This is where I will install it, D Android Studio. So I will go back here and browse, change this to D Android Studio, say OK, and next. And you can see all this, it will get set up. I will say install, and you can see it is coming here in my folder. Everything is getting set up here. Now the reason we are getting Android Studio is to do the setup on our system so that we can do Android mobile testing using Appium. And we have already seen there, this is the second option. The first option is we just get the required tools that we have already seen. So you can choose any of these options. I'm showing you both so that you know both the options and you can select what you want. Or if anyone is following the Android Studio way, they can just see the second option. That is what we are doing now. So it is on you, what do you want to do. Okay, so it is completed, and then it is saying you can keep it checked, start Android Studio. So I will say finish. It will finish the setup and then start Android Studio. So this is starting. Okay, so for now I'll just say don't send. Okay, and we have got the welcome screen. So we have started Android Studio on Windows. Let us very quickly see on Mac as well. So on Mac we have already downloaded the Android Studio DMG file. So I will just check this. If I go to my downloads folder, yes, it is here, and I will double click this and it will ask me to place it in my applications folder. So I will drag and drop it in my applications folder, and sometimes it may ask you for your system password and sometimes not. So I think it has added it in my applications folder. I can just check in my applications folder. Android Studio is here. So now I can go from here and double click and open Android Studio, or I can just go to, I will close this, I can just go to Spotlight search. I am pressing command and space on my keyboard to bring up Spotlight search, and if I start typing Android Studio, I am getting this. So I will open it from here. So it is starting, and again the same screens, and yes, we have got the welcome screen here. Okay, so we have done these 3 steps both on Windows and Mac operating system. Now the fourth step is we will go to Tools SDK Manager, and then we will get our SDK tools on the system. So let me just go here, say next. Now here it is asking me choose the type of setup, standard or custom. When you say standard, Android Studio will install the most common settings and options, and if you say custom, you can customize installation settings and components installed. So let us see in custom what all we will see. I will say next. So when you say custom, you can actually see what all will get installed along with check boxes. So if you want, you can check or uncheck whatever you don't want or whatever you want. So here you can see it says it will get the Android SDK, Android 14, this is the Android OS, then all this performance Intel HAXM performance Android emulator hypervisor Android virtual device. So it will get all this. Okay, and in case you want to do it separately, you can do that, and then it will ask you for the location. Okay, so you can select where do you want to get this. Also you can see the download size here, it will be almost 1.99 GB or almost 2 GB. Okay, so here I will say I want to get it in my D drive, and I will say I will create a new folder. I will say SDK Tools, and I will click here to change the location. So this will be D and SDK Tools, and I will say next. So now here all this is for the virtual device, and it is saying how much RAM do you want to allocate. I'll just keep it as it is and say next, next, and it is showing me all that will get installed, and say next. And then you can check all this, read this, and then accept. And for this as well, you can read all this and then accept and say finish, and this will start the process, and this can take some time. Now the virtual device part, it is on you. If you want to use emulators or virtual devices on Android Studio, you can go with that. If you do not want, you can skip that part. While you are installing, you can skip that. As we have already seen, while we were doing the Android Studio, we were going through the installation wizard, we had the option to check or uncheck the virtual device part. So you can go along with what is your need, what is your requirement. In case you are going to use physical devices, then you don't need emulators, and if you don't need emulators, you can just skip that. We can also use remote cloud devices from some cloud platforms. I'm going to show you all that. I'm going to show you how do you use emulators, how do you use the physical devices, and then how do you use the devices from remote cloud platforms. Okay, so this will do the download and setup. Meanwhile, let us go on our Mac system and do the same thing here. So here you can go to the SDK Manager. So we have the SDK Manager here. Okay, and here you can see we have Android 14 upside down cake here. It is already selected. You can also go here and say show package details. So if I check this, it will expand and show what all it will get. So it will get the Android SDK Platform 34 and the sources for Android 34, and then there are all other things which we do not need. In case you need any of these, you can check this. Okay, so the system images, all this we will need when we are trying to set up a AVD or Android virtual device or emulator, but for now this will be enough. Okay, then in the SDK tools, you can see it is getting Android emulator and SDK platform tools. Okay, and then this is the location. in case you want to change the location, you can change it. So let us say I want to store everything here, maybe on this folder, or maybe on this projects folder. Okay, I will create a new folder here called SDK Tools, and this is where I want it. So I will go here and say edit, and I will change the location in my desktop projects. This is where I want it, and then I will say next, and you can see all that will get set up. Next, again you can read and accept the license and say next, and this will do the setup here in the SDK Tools. Okay, so you can see all these folders are coming here. If I go back to my Mac system and see here, you can see all these folders are coming here. Okay, so see all these platform tools, build tools have come here. Okay, now see here I am getting some error, and this is for the virtualization technology. So see, it is saying the CPU, your CPU does not support features required VTX or SVM. So VTX and SVM, these are the virtualization technologies, and these are the features available on the chip of your system, on the processor. And if you do not have this feature, then the virtual devices will not work. Now the reason I am getting this is because I am using a remote virtual machine for this Windows machine, and generally the virtualization can be done on a physical hardware. If you are already using a virtual machine, virtualization or creating a virtual device over a virtual machine is not directly possible. So you should either be using a physical system, or you should be using, if you're using a remote or a cloud system, it should be a bare metal system. So here, if I show you, I have some notes for this as well. I think if you go in the references section, here you can see what is VTX virtualization, how to check or enable it. So VTX is the virtualization technology, and if you're on Windows, this is how you can check or enable virtualization technologies. This is for Mac. Now this particular thing will not be generally available on a virtual machine, so you cannot create a virtual device over a virtual machine. And you can see all this, how it works. Okay, and then if you want to set up if you want to use virtual devices over a cloud machine or a remote machine, you have to get a bare metal instance. So if I show you here, I think there was a, yeah, you can see here, this is just for reference. So if you're using Amazon EC2 machines, then you can check here. If I search for metal, you can see there are some bare metal instances that you can use, some Windows instances bare metal that you can use here, but then it will be costly. So you have to accordingly see if you want to use them, or if you have a physical device and you are doing everything there on the physical device, then it should be okay. You should be having that. Okay, so on here my Mac, it should be fine because this is my physical machine. So this is all fine. I will click on finish. Okay, and we have got this. Now see, one difference here was on Mac I got this screen directly, and then from here I could go to SDK Manager or Virtual Device Manager, but here first it did the installation and then we have got here. Okay, so if I now go to SDK Manager, I can select, in case I want to add SDK tools for any other Android version, I can select from here. I can go to SDK tools and also select all that I need from here, and then this is the location where it will get all the SDK tools, and then I can get it from here. So as of now it has already, you can see what is already installed So this one is already installed, which is Android 14, and we have got the build tools and the platform tools here. Similarly, if I go on my Mac, I have got the build tools, the platform tools all here. So now this is the folder that we will make as Android home, and also we will add path of our build tools and platform tools folder in our path environment variable. So this is what we have to do. So we have done all this until step number 6. Now we have to do step number 7, that is we have to add these environment variables. So on Windows, so this is the folder where you have all these folders, platform tools and build tools. This should be the folder that you will give as Android home. So go to your environment variables. I am pressing the Windows key and I will start typing environment variables and go here. And I have already told you about environment variables earlier, that here we have environment variable for the user and then for the system. So based on the need and the permissions you have, you can set the environment variables anywhere. So in my case, I can update at a system level, so I will go here. Now see, this Android home we created in our last part, the earlier part, where we did all this SDK tools we added manually, but now I will change this. So I will double click here and I will change the location. Okay, another way just to make sure that you don't make any mistakes is you can say browse directory and then select the folder so that it will come here directly. So this is my Android home now. Okay, and then for the path environment variable, I will go to edit. Now see, this build tools and platform tools, I do not have to make any changes because we are already referring the first part from the Android home environment variable, and then it will go to build tools. Same here, platform tools, so I do not have to make any changes. In case you have added the paths manually, then you will give the entire path, otherwise you can just go with this, that is %Android home %Android underscore home %, and then /build tools, and then %Android underscore home /platform tools. Okay, so say OK, and come out. Now I need to check that whether I have everything ready for Android testing. So I will go to my command prompt and now I will say appium-doctor --Android. So let us see what happens this time. And you can see it has found Android home here. So Android home is here. Then JDK we have already set up in the last part and everything is fine. It is saying APK analyzer could not be found, so that is fine for now. We don't need as of now, but otherwise everything is here. Okay, so this is fine. If I go back on my Mac system, I'll just close this. Okay, now I have to set the path for Android home and environment variables path. So I will open my terminal and go to my .zshrc file, open it. In case you are using earlier operating systems of Mac, you can go to .bash profile. So this we have already seen and learnt in the last part. How do we check which is our default shell and then how do we change it here. So here for Android home I will change the location, which will be my this SDK tools folder. So if I selected this folder and pressed command I to get the information from where I can just copy the location, and I will change this here. Okay, and then I do not have to make any other changes because this part platform tools and build tools it will directly take from this, will take go to Android home, and then we have set /platform tools and build tools. So this is fine. I will save and close this, and I will have to exit from this terminal, open a new terminal, and then I will say appium-doctor --Android, and yes, you can see looks like everything is fine here. Okay, we have got everything, just that APK analyzer, which is fine for now, we don't need it. Okay, and everything is okay here. Okay, so we were able to run the step number 8, where we have checked all the requirements are completed. Okay, so some images for reference. So whenever you are getting SDK tools, you can check this show package details to see the details of what will get installed, and then in case you want to update the location of installation, you can always change it here. Okay, now one question you may have, that this time we did not get command line tools as we get in the earlier option when we were doing it manually, and the reason is the command line tools we got was mainly to get the SDK manager that we use further to run a command using SDK manager, and then get platform tools and build tools. So if you remember in the last part, so if I go and check, so here if I see, we have got this, let me see which was the folder we were using. So here if I check, yeah, so here Android, we had command line tools here, and here if you see in this bin folder, we had got this SDK manager.bat, and this we used this particular commands using SDK manager, we used this commands to get platform tools and build tools. But here in Android Studio we have already got that from the GUI, so we do not need that command line tools separately. Okay, so that is the reason we are not having command line tools now. Okay, so with this we have done the setup of Android Studio, and we have also added the required SDK tools based on the Android version we need to test, and we have set up the paths, and we are ready for doing Android testing. Okay, now here we have how to do Android virtual device setup for automation, and here we have options to create a emulator or Android virtual device AVD using Android Studio. Then we have option to create the emulator without using Android Studio, and then there are some other options as well that we can use for setting up the Android virtual device or emulator. And then there is option to use cloud devices as well, using some cloud platforms like BrowserStack, Sauce Labs, AWS Device Farms, etc. And then in case we want, we can also use a real device. So all these devices, how do we set up the devices, the emulators, the virtual devices and the physical devices, this we will do in the next session. I hope this was very useful for you. If you have any questions, any doubts, you can let me know in the comment section. I will see you in the next session of APM. Thank you for watching, and never stop learning.